What's going on, guys, and welcome to my Friday Night SmackDown audio review for August 5th, 2022. I am Graham GSM Matthews. Hope you guys are doing well. Usually I do not do SmackDown audio reviews this late on a Monday, but the show on Friday wasn't this blow-away great show by any means, but it was significant enough for me to come on here 2 days later and talk about it. I know the show was 3 days ago, but usually I review the show on Saturdays here on the channel in audio form. It was a pretty significant show, if only for that ending, as you can tell by the thumbnail for this video. Karrion Kross back in WWE alongside Scarlett, no less. And not only just back in WWE, showing up in the beginning of the show or in the middle of the show, going after, the Intercontinental Championship or squashing a jobber. No, he was at the end of the show laying out Drew McIntyre and staring down the undisputed WWE Universal Champion Roman Reigns. So a lot to get into here today on the SmackDown audio review. In addition to the fact that I did not do a SmackDown review last week. I was in Nashville for SummerSlam weekend. I haven't even watched that whole show yet. I still got to go back and watch a lot of what I missed in the last 2 weeks. But that will be coming at some point as far as the written review on that show. For this show, same thing. But let's get right into it from an audio standpoint. Opening the show, Ricochet and Happy Corbin. So starting the show actually was Pat McAfee on commentary, going over his win over Corbin at SummerSlam and how he hit the low blow on him. In the moment when I first saw that, I'm thinking, I know why he would do it. He wanted to win, but I'm thinking, Pat McAfee's a babyface. He's a loved commentator. Why would he cheat to win? But then I remembered that 2 days earlier on SmackDown, which I was half paying attention to when I watched it the first time, Corbin hit him with a low blow. So it was really just McAfee kind of evening the odds as far as that goes. And he went over it here, John Madden style, which was funny. And then Corbin took exception to that in the back, watching the TV, and like a normal person, no less. Ricochet stands up to Corbin backstage, challenges him to an impromptu match, which Ricochet wins. I thought this was a really fun opener. I think this marked the first on-air appearance of Ricochet on SmackDown in 2 months. We have not seen Ricochet on SmackDown since he lost to Gunther in the rematch for the Intercontinental Championship in late June. So not only have they not done anything with him, I don't even think he's been featured. And I could be wrong on that front, but I'm pretty sure I would remember seeing Ricochet in some form or fashion in the last month and a half, 2 months. But he was back here with a win over Corbin. And what I said, I thought was a very fun match. They worked well together. Ricochet got to go in there and do Ricochet things, show off his athleticism and his awe-inspiring offense, blah, blah, blah. Corbin, the perfect foil for him. And Ricochet went over in the end after McAfee kind of served as sort of a distraction at ringside. Now, this could be going one of two directions. One, the McAfee and Corbin stuff is not over yet, and we're going to get a rematch that Corbin wins on SmackDown, if not a Clash of the Castle. The feud was fun. The match wasn't great between Corbin and McAfee. It was probably one of, if not the weakest match on all of SummerSlam. Aside from the 4-minute matches with, Ronda and Liv and Theory and Lashley. As a full-blown match, definitely the weakest of the night. I'm not exactly anticipating a rematch. So that's not exactly why that's not the direction I'm hoping to go in. Rather, the second route I would take instead is Corbin once again going down the downward spiral. And we either get bum-ass broke Baron Corbin back, as we did last summer, which was far and away the best incarnation of Corbin since NXT, if not even better than that. Or we get Lone Wolf Corbin, which I know a lot of people aren't as high on, but at least that would be more tolerable than what we're getting right now with Happy Corbin. And I like Corbin a lot. I've always been a big Corbin fan. The Happy Corbin stuff, although it was refreshing at first when he first started doing it last summer, at the end of last summer, it's run its course. The character's run its course. He did the whole Madcap Moss thing. He lost to him. He lost to McAfee at SummerSlam. He loses to Ricochet here. It's time for him to go dark again and bring back that great fucking entrance music from when he was the Lone Wolf a year. And we didn't even really hear it when he was the King, because it was like a remix between the King theme and the regular theme by Jim Johnston. So get rid of all the gimmickry shit, make him the Lone Wolf again. He can be broke. That would be entertaining too, but long term, I would have him go back to what he was early on in his time in WWE on the main roster, if not in NXT. Our second match on the show saw Shinsuke Nakamura defeat Ludwig Kaiser to earn an Intercontinental Championship opportunity for next week. This was the third match. These two have had. It was fine, just kind of serving to give Nakamura a win, to kind of rebound from the loss to Kaiser a few weeks ago and earn him that championship opportunity for next week. I thought it would be a Clash of the Castle, but they're doing it next week. Which honestly, because he wasn't on this show, it gives me hope. And I like Nakamura and Gunther as a match. That should be, if given time next week, should be a great fucking hard-hitting affair. what I'm hoping they do, unless they do some sort of a non-finish to set up a rematch for the pay-per-view, I'm hoping they get it out of the way here. So we get Gunther defending at Clash of the Castle. And by the way, he has not just him, but the Intercontinental Championship has not been defended on pay-per-view since WrestleMania 37. And for those keeping track at home, that is not WrestleMania this year. That's WrestleMania last year. And it was a 5-minute match between Big E and Apollo Crews. That is fucking ridiculous. Obviously, Gunther is a European native. He's from England or Austria, whatever. He has to be on that show. That championship has to be on that show. The last time they were in Europe for a major pay-per-view, aside from like the one-night-only Insurrection shows, whatever, was SummerSlam 92, 30 years ago, and the Intercontinental Championship was defended in the main event. So it doesn't have to be defended in the main event on that show. I mean, we're already getting Roman and Drew in the main event, obviously. But long story short, what I would do, Gunther, not against Nakamura, but Sheamus. I know Sheamus is a heel right now. That crowd would not give a fuck. That crowd would not give a shit. They are going to cheer Sheamus. They will cheer Gunther. They might even boo Sheamus. Who knows? But that would be a fantastic match to do on that show. I would say Gunther and Drew, but Gunther's already, or Drew's already facing Roman. So the next best option, in my opinion, Nakamura is great. Sheamus would be better. And obviously, the thing with Sheamus, though, I know Sheamus really, really, really wants the Intercontinental Championship, and I want to see him win that championship at some point, if only for his own sake, so he can finally cross that off his bucket list. You know, that would be cool. Gunther should be champion for a while. If he was to lose it to anyone, Sheamus would not be a bad option. Regardless, I would do that match on that show. Over the course of the show, we saw Sami Zayn backstage bothering the Usos, trying to get a word with Roman Reigns in his locker room. The Usos would not let him. Paul Heyman was not on the show. We were told at the end of the show by Roman in his promo that he was not at a local medical facility, but rather at a fucking hospital. Probably the first time the word hospital has been used on WWE TV, and God knows how long. It probably not ever, but maybe a decade and a half, 2 decades, who knows, but Roman did indeed use the word hospital in his promo to close out the show, which was, it's so silly, it's so small and stupid, it really shouldn't make much of a difference, but it does. It's so refreshing they're not going out of their way to not use the word hospital anymore. It's just stuff like that makes the product so much more bearable now that Vince isn't in charge creatively anymore. Anyway, what was I even saying? Oh, the Sami Zayn stuff. So Heyman was not on the show. I like the fact, I'm thinking like, is he okay? But I'm thinking, oh, okay. He, got F5'd at SummerSlam. It's nice they're keeping him off the show, if only for 1 week, to sell the attack. So Sami Zayn bothering the Usos, and Jay kind of went off on Sami. I thought he would say, oh, you're not even a member of the Bloodline. But he didn't say that. He just said, oh, you're not holding your weight. You got to start, picking up your weight, picking up the slack. Otherwise, you can't be a member of our group. Assuming he was even a member to begin with. So clearly, this has to be, especially with Triple H in charge now, leading to a Sami Zayn babyface turn. He's been a fantastic heel for 5 years now, but it's been just that 5 years that Sami Zayn has been a heel on the main roster. He was only a babyface in the main roster for about a year and a half, and he's been a heel now for 5 years. He's been a part of the main roster for 6.5 years, which is crazy to think about. He's made the most of his time. He's been hurt for a little while, taking time off here and there, but largely, Sami Zayn has been one of the MVPs, the unsung heroes of Raw and SmackDown since 2016, in the ring and specifically from a character standpoint. So this has got to be leading to Sami getting betrayed by the Usos and the Bloodline. And as other people have said, as I have pitched myself as well, Kevin and Sami gunning for the tag team titles and ultimately beating the Usos for those tag team titles they have held since last July, 13 months ago. Do you do it at Clash of the Castle? You could. That crowd would go nuts. That's the next biggest show. I know they have history in Philly, which is where they're going to be for Extreme Rules. That's a story you can drag out a little bit longer. But Kevin has not been seen on SmackDown in a few weeks. They can bring him back as part of the storyline. I know they're on separate shows, but listen, the tag team titles are unified anyway. Does it even matter that Sami and Kevin are on separate shows? They give no fucks about the brand split. Maybe Triple H does. I hope he does. But honestly, in this case, I'll make an exception because they're on separate shows, yes. But the tag titles are unified. The Usos can go to any show they want anyway, so does it even matter? Kayla Braxton was in the ring interviewing Liv Morgan, the SmackDown Women's Champion, when she was interrupted by "You tapped out" chants and boos, which honestly took me by surprise. I won't go on a massive rant about this here, but I will say this. Anyone blaming the booking, I get to an extent. The booking of that finish at SummerSlam was not extremely ideal. I said so on Twitter that it was when it happened, but I did not see Liv Morgan tapping out. I thought Ronda just went for the armbar. Liv rolled her up. Why Liv would tap out as she was pinning Rousey, I'm not exactly sure. Maybe to make Ronda think that she tapped out so Ronda would, give up the hold or whatever. But if she knew she was pinning Ronda, I mean, that's never really made any sense to me as far as when people tap out at the last second. Why would they do that if they know they're getting the 3 count? If you don't get the 3 count, then tap out. That's never really made a lot of sense to me. Again, maybe to make Ronda think that the match was over. But if she won with the 3 count anyway, then what does it even matter? But anyway, so she got booed. Honestly, Liv has been booked just fine as champion. She's won all of her matches. She's very over as a babyface, or at least she was before Friday. I think it was a 1-week thing. If it continues, I don't know what I would do, honestly, with Liv. I would not turn her heel. Anyone saying, oh, you got to roll with the punches, normally I agree with that, and Liv would not be an awful heel. I mean, she could be an opportunistic heel. But to book Liv as the heel when Ronda is not at all likable as a heel, or as a babyface, rather, to do that feud with those roles, I think would be incredibly dumb. And honestly, Liv's reign would be cut short fairly quickly. Liv is not going to be champion for very long, probably anyway. I mean, she should be champion for a few more months, in my opinion. If Shayna beats her at Clash of the Castle, I wouldn't be extremely upset, because Shayna's great, and we'll get to her in a second. But with Liv, though, I feel at this point she is more natural as a babyface. She's a natural underdog, and when she won the title, and not even when she won the title, but the subsequent promos and appearances on TV, she was incredibly over. She was getting great reactions at house shows, on the TV shows. Why the fuck would you turn her heel just because one crowd booed her and wherever they were on Friday? I don't know. I thought that was very silly. I honestly blame the fickle fans on that one. People can blame the booking, and honestly, more often than not, I do. It's not really the fans' fault most of the time. In this one particular instance, and I'm not even like the biggest Liv Morgan fan ever, so I'm not biased, I think it's the fault of the fans. They literally turned on her for no fucking reason. She won clean as a sheet. Sure, she tapped out. Okay. The way that it happened was a bit silly, but it's not like she was bragging about it. I mean, the way she talked about it was a little, again, not ideal. She handled herself well, and it clearly was not planned. I don't think their plan was to turn her heel, based on how she reacted to the boos and how Kayla was reacting or whatever. I mean, I don't know. No one deserves that sort of shit, obviously. I'm not going to say, oh, she doesn't deserve it, so don't do it. It just doesn't make much sense. That, honestly, to me, is more of a case of the fans being fickle than anything else. That's just me. So we had a gauntlet match that determined the number 1 contender to the SmackDown Women's Championship to face Liv at Clash of the Castle next month, won by none other than Shayna Baszler. The match itself was not very good at all. It was not a great gauntlet. It wasn't supposed to be a great gauntlet. You had 7 women in there, I think. You had Shayna, Raquel, Natalya, Xia Li, Shotzi, Sonya, and Aaliyah. So that's 7 women right there. That's a majority of the division. Lacey Evans was not in there. I'm glad she wasn't in there. They should be I don't know what the fuck they're doing with her, but, they said last week on the show that she wasn't cleared to compete against Aaliyah. She wasn't on the show. She wasn't here this week. I'm not exactly sure if that's legit or not. I have no idea what's going on with Lacey, but she was conspicuous by her absence in this match. The layout was perfectly fine. Sonya got the first fall over Aaliyah. Okay. Then Raquel went on to beat everyone that she faced. She beat Natalya. She beat Sonya. She beat Shotzi. She beat Xia Li. The matches were absolutely nothing of note. Even Shayna and Raquel was very, brief. But again, I wasn't hoping for an instant classic here. A lot of the women in this match, I mean, Shotzi's fine. Xia Li is I mean, there's a lot of actually talented women in the match, but I did not go into this thing expecting it for it to be a classic. It only served to get Raquel over as this dominant babyface before she lost ultimately to Shayna Baszler by the skin of her teeth. That's the only reason this match existed, and to give Shayna a win. So now we have Shayna and Liv at Clash of the Castle. Like I said, I would keep the belt on Liv for a little bit longer. She's only been champion for a month. But if Shayna were to win in some sort of even fluky fashion, which I would not do, I would not be opposed to that. Shayna has been so far underutilized for so fucking long now, for as long as she's been in this company. For as long as she's been in the main roster, I'll say. She had a great run in NXT. For as long as she was in NXT, she had a great run there. The problem was that Vince never gave a fucking shit about her. So as soon as she got called up, she was a vampire, and then she lost to WrestleMania, she lost to Money in the Bank, she lost here, she lost there. She had the tag team title stuff that went on for way longer than it should have with Nia Jax. He just never gave a shit about her, and she was never going to become champion when Vince was there. Triple H, different story. I'm not even saying Shayna has to win, but I would not complain if she did. Let's just put it that way. The Viking Raiders quickly squashed 2 job guys named Jim Mulkey and Tommy Gibson. Probably a nod to two old school wrestlers. Robert Gibson of the Rock and Roll Express. Mulkey, I think, was an old-time job team from the Jim Crockett Promotions I had read somewhere. So that's probably what that was a reference to. So the Raiders quickly squashed them pretty quickly. Kofi came out afterward, beating up the Raiders with a kendo stick. And then that led to an impromptu match coming out of the commercial break with Kofi facing Erik. Short match. It was fine for what it was. Kofi won with like a roll-up. The way that it was done was okay. Didn't exactly do much for the Raiders, obviously. But I guess the mindset is, okay, they won their match. It wasn't a tag team match. It was a fluky win. I mean, sure. I mean, it's not a feud I've overly cared about so far, but it's been decent. Kofi's on his own for the time being. And the Raiders have done well as heels so far. So this was fine to further the feud. Nothing bad, nothing great. It was just kind of there for me. To close out the show, we had Roman Reigns, supposed to be addressing Drew McIntyre. Roman spoke for a few minutes, and not Paul, because Paul wasn't there, obviously. So Roman spoke for a few minutes about beating Brock and how he fucking hates Brock. He didn't say fucking, but, he hates Brock, but he respects him. Paul Heyman, he said, was in a hospital, as we mentioned earlier. And then before I could say anything further, out came Drew McIntyre, who was looking for a fight. Honestly, I thought with the way the show was going to close, the fact this was ending the show, and Roman usually opens the show, I'm thinking Solo Sikoa showing up. Because the Sami stuff was so heavily teased on the show, I'm thinking Sami's going to come out, maybe attack Drew or whatever. Attempt to attack Drew, he falls short. The Bloodline beats the fuck out of Sami Zayn. And then out comes Solo Sikoa. The only reason I didn't think Solo was going to debut at SummerSlam was because he already had the match with Von Wagner coming up in NXT. He won that match on Tuesday, the Falls Count Anywhere match. There's really nothing keeping Solo Sikoa in NXT any longer. I think they teased him in Carmelo, so maybe he will spend a little bit more time there, and he won't be called up immediately, maybe in like a couple of months. I mean, he's ready, I think, now. I mean, he's been in NXT for about a year now. Solo's great. Anyway, but it was not Solo Sikoa, but rather Karrion Kross and Scarlett. They played the old music. Scarlett had her, eccentric look, to put it lightly, I guess, to say the least. She had the time thing. I honestly forget what the fuck it's called. And she just kind of left it on the ring apron and stared down Karrion, or stared down Roman, as did Karrion. And that was the end of the show, as Karrion attacked Drew and threw him into the ring steps and whatever. The crowd did not go crazy, but why would they? He was on the main roster for all of, 5 months? And that's being generous. I mean, a majority of the time he was on main event. He lost almost all of his matches. He was a fucking loser. He had that stupid-ass fucking helmet before he left. He didn't have hair at that point. A majority of the people in the building probably did not even know who he was when he came out on this show. So for anyone saying, oh, they went mild, they didn't give a shit. Yeah, because they have no fucking clue who he is. And a majority of those people probably do not watch NXT and have no idea who he is. So don't get this started, oh, it was already a bust. It went over like a wet fart. Yeah, because a majority of them either didn't give a fuck about the guy from what they saw of him on the main roster, and a majority of them didn't even know who he was, probably, from his time in NXT, because they don't watch NXT. And he was on the main roster for a cup of coffee last year, so why the hell would they give a shit about this random job guy in their eyes attacking Drew? The key here now is making people care about Karrion Kross. Will it work? I don't know. Here's my thing. I'm not even sitting here telling you that Karrion will be a big star, that he will be the world champion, or even that he should be the world champion. I don't know. But it's worth the shot. The thing with Karrion under Vince was that Karrion Kross was never even given a fucking chance to get over in front of that crowd because of how he was booked. So this whole self-fulfilling prophecy bullshit from last year, and I argued with so many people over Twitter when Karrion debuted, he had one of the worst debuts I've ever seen in the history of the show, or at least in the last 10, 15 years. That debut was fucking terrible. Scarlett was not there. The entrance was watered down. His undefeated streak was ended in 90 seconds by a guy in Jeff Hardy who, yes, is a legend, but Jeff was already booked like a loser prior to that point, and the match was all about Jeff Hardy, him winning and getting his old music back. No one gave a shit about Karrion Kross the moment Jeff came out with his old music. The whole thing, the way that was booked, was terrible. And there was no follow-up either. The whole rumor was, oh, they're going to have Jeff come back and Karrion will beat him. Okay, yeah, he avenged the loss, but no one gave a shit. No one gave a fuck about Jeff at that point. No one gave a fuck about Karrion Kross. Karrion had a couple of matches with Keith Lee. He lost one of those too. I mean, yeah, he won. I misspoke earlier. I think he did win a majority of his matches on Raw when he was shown. But then they gave him the stupid-ass mask. And people said when he got released, oh, he wasn't over anyway. Give me a fucking break. They didn't even try. Vince McMahon did not even try with this man. And the weirdest thing about it is that you think that he would. Because Karrion fits checks all the boxes of what Vince you would think would look for in a top star. He's not doing 450s in the ring, and quite honestly, I don't really give a shit about that. People saying, and listen, if you're not a fan of Karrion Kross, that's fine. I don't fault you for that. Not everyone is for everyone. I get it. But to me, listen, in-ring is important, but it's not everything. How many fucking times have we heard that? We've seen far worse workers than Karrion Kross get over as big stars in WWE. And maybe it's because they had far more charisma than Karrion does. But again, we don't even know how well this is going to work if they don't even try. He was a big star in NXT. I enjoyed his work in NXT. I enjoyed the matches. I thought the presentation was great. Sometimes it's all a matter of how these people are booked and portrayed and what their presentation is. If they go all in on Karrion and he doesn't get over and it doesn't work and it's a failure, then that's fine. I'm not even saying, oh, eat my words. No, I mean, it's fine. I mean, I get it, but at least they fucking tried. Vince McMahon never even tried with this man. He never even tried with Scarlett. The idea was, even Scarlett, injury notwithstanding, they weren't even going to put her in the fucking manager role with Karrion Kross. I've seen Scarlett in the ring. She's not awful. She's actually better than I thought she was. But I'm sorry, not everyone is destined to be in the ring. Maybe at some point, a lot later down the road, she can have the occasional match, but she's just not as good as a lot of the other women on that show. She would not do anything on her own. She's not Sable circa 2022. She's just not meant to be in the ring as far as a wrestler. I'm sorry. At least not in this company. So, her in the manager role, I think, is the perfect fit for her. Triple H knows that. That's her strength. And I'm not even saying, oh, she's just eye candy because she's beautiful. No, I think she can talk. I think she really adds a lot to the presentation. She's not just his fucking lackey or whatever. No, she adds a lot to the presentation alongside Karrion. And like I said, maybe the occasional mixed tag team match down the road could work. For now, her role is not in the ring. So the idea to break them up in the first place so long ago was stupid. It was dumb. Because her role is by his side as a manager for now than it was in the ring about a year ago, or even now. So again, he looked like a badass attacking Drew. They're going to give him a shot, and if they go all in with a push and it doesn't work, like, listen, the Jinder stuff, I shit on him all the time. I never really thought the Jinder stuff would work, because the guy has always been beyond boring to me. And people say the same thing about Karrion, and that's fine. I just think with Jinder, he tried really to no fault of his own. Just in the ring, he's just not that good. And he was booked like a loser for a lot longer than Karrion was. It's not even like Jinder had just debuted or he had been around for a year or two and was booked decently as a mid-carder. He was a loser. He was a fucking loser for years. Not even like Karrion, who was a loser for a few months in the main roster. Jinder was booked like a loser for years. All of a sudden, we're supposed to care. The matches with Nakamura and Randy were not that good, and his promos were not that good. This might be a hot take, but I think Karrion Kross is better than Jinder. Probably not that hot of a take, but I think he's better with the promos. I think he's better in the ring. He just looks like more of a star. And I mean, actually, that's not true. Jinder did look like a star. He's got an amazing physique. He really got himself into great shape. I mean, roids or not, who knows? I don't know. That was a rumor at the time. He looked like a star, but when that bell rang, there was absolutely nothing special about Jinder Mahal. The presentation was money, like it is with Karrion. But when that bell rang, I mean, Karrion isn't amazing in the ring, but I think he's better than Jinder. Jinder had some fucking terrible matches as champion, and his promo sucked too. And the booking also didn't help. He wasn't really booked like a dominant champion. He did lose a few matches here and there for whatever reason. So anyway, my point being this. It may not work with Karrion, but we will not know unless they try. So I loved what we saw at the end of the show. I know there were rumors from Fightful earlier in the day that he could be back at some point, and I'm thinking that's likely. Given that he was a big Triple H guy with Karrion Kross, and Triple H is running the show now. They brought back Dakota Kai and Io Sky and whatever at SummerSlam. I'm thinking, okay, if those ladies are back, and one of them was fired, and they were brought back as quickly as they were, Karrion will absolutely be back at some point. Like Johnny Gargano, I'm not saying he will debut tonight or return tonight, but there's a very big chance, and there is no doubt in my mind he will be back in WWE. If Gargano chose AEW over WWE, I'm sorry, he'd be a fucking idiot, because he would end up in the dark main event and they would do nothing with him. Unless he was in the main event, which he wouldn't be and probably shouldn't be. He should go back to WWE. Under the leadership of Triple H, I mean, he'd be a fool not to at this point. But anyway, with Karrion, I figured it was inevitable that he'd be back. I didn't know it would happen this soon. That was really what was newsworthy about this, was not only the fact that Karrion's back, but the fashion he was reintroduced in, and the fact he was back as quickly as he was. I mean, the man was literally at the Ric Flair last match show 5 days earlier, beating David Hart Smith Jr. in a match. He was advertised for dates with multiple promotions across the Northeast and across the country. He's been in MLW for a few months now. He's been back there. and they were kind of talking about him as like the future of MLW. So the fact that he was as back as, I mean, I don't know when the conversation started with Karrion and Triple H. I would like to think as soon as Triple H took over, he called up Karrion and said, hey, buddy, what's your schedule like? I'd like to bring you back. Maybe it was on Monday. Who fucking knows? Maybe they met up in Nashville. No one knows. But the fact is he's back, and I'm happy. Ricochet got a bit of some shine on the show, as did Shayna, as did Karrion. The black and gold brand may not be back in NXT, but we're getting that black and gold feeling vibe on the main roster now from Raw and SmackDown. Not saying the shows will be infinitely better, but already the signs of improvement are there. This was not a blow-away great show, but it was absolutely better under the leadership of Triple H than it ever was under the leadership of Vince McMahon. That just goes without saying. So I enjoyed the show overall. The 2 hours flew by for me. The ending was obviously newsworthy. They furthered some stuff, set some stuff up for next week in the pay-per-view. Can't ask for much more than that. Thank you guys for checking out my SmackDown audio review for August 5th, 2022. My review of the SmackDown Lowdown will be up also today as well, so check that out when you get a chance. And that's about it, guys. Also, cheap plug, my interview with hopefully soon-to-be WWE Hall of Famer Lex Luger is up now here on the channel. We talk his A&E biography from last night. We talked his scrapped WWE Icon special, the current product, watching Ric Flair's last match, his thoughts on that, and a lot more. So check that out if you haven't already in audio form, in an article form over at dailyddt.com, but specifically in audio form here on the channel from yesterday. And more interviews to come from SummerSlam weekend and a lot of other stuff I have planned. So keep an eye out for that. With all that being said, guys, have a great rest of your week. I'm Graham G.S. Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.